Article 2 outlines the structure of the executive branch of the federal government. It grants the formal powers of the president, such as his responsibilities as commander-in-chief of the military, and to propose amendments to treaties. It also grants him the power to appoint members of the executive branch, such as ambassadors. Requirements of the President. He must be 35 years old, a natural-born citizen, and have lived in the United States for 14 years. Powers of the President. Formal, commander-in-chief, pardons and reprieves, veto power, treaty-making, appointments, state of the Union, and calling sessions of Congress. Informal, recognize new countries, presidential orders carry the force of law, executive agreement, executive privilege, bully pulpit. War Powers Act stated that the president could send troops to other countries, but after 60 days, these troops must be removed unless Congress says otherwise. Recess appointment. An appointment made by the president made while Congress is not in session. These last for 2 years. Line item veto. This was the power for the president to sign a bill into law while vetoing specific parts of a bill. It only lasted a year before it was made unconstitutional in the court case Clinton v. New York. Twelfth Amendment ended the vice president simply being the runner-up in the presidential election. The vice president was actually on the ticket. 20th Amendment moved inauguration to January 20 if president dies. The vice president becomes president, and he gets to select the new vice president. Twenty-second Amendment. A president may only run 2 terms. 25th Amendment. Choose new vice president if old one quits or dies. Vice president and half of cabinet can remove president. President can give up power temporarily. Primaries. Statewide elections, more people participate than caucuses. Caucuses. Meeting with voting, survivor, cheaper than primaries. Front-loading. Making state primaries super early so that states can gain power in determining the winning candidate. Open primary. Primaries where the voters can pick which parties to vote for. They do not have to be a registered Democrat or Republican. closed primary. You must be a registered member of each party candidate you are voting for. Blanket primary. You vote for both parties' candidates. Electoral College. Each state gets the number of representatives and senators as the number of electoral votes, with the exception of 2 states. Each state implements a winner-take-all system. Bureaucracy. EOP. Executive Office of President, referred to as West Wing. They see President on a day-to-day basis. Cabinet departments. 15 total of various size, status, visibility, and function. They all advise the President, help execute, implement programs, have broad responsibility. Examples: State Offense, biggest, HHS, Agriculture, Commerce, Homeland Security, Attorney General. Independent executive agency. Narrower in focus, President cannot fire them, he can only ask them to resign. Independent regulatory agency. All 3 powers write, execute and hold trials. Discretion as to what regulations to increase or decrease. Government corporation. A company run by the government for services that are essential, but not profitable for the public eye. Amtrak and the USPS. Campaign finance. Legislation aimed at placing limits on political candidates accepting money and gifts from individuals and special interest groups. Federal Election Campaign Act. Created Federal Election Committee, created donation limits of $1,000 per candidate per individual. PACs can donate $5,000 per candidate per election. Public financing requires a candidate to acquire 15% of the vote in a previous election or accumulate $5,000 in 20 states. The government then matches $250 per donation. McCain-Feingold. Banned soft money, increased hard money limits from 1,000 to 2,000, restricted the times that issue ads could be broadcasted. Hard money v. soft money. Hard money is campaign donations that is under the restrictions and regulations of the government. Soft money is campaign funding donated not under these restrictions. Buckley v. Valeo. Court case that resulted in outside donation limits are okay, but limits on personal donations are unconstitutional. Iron triangles. A system that serves to further bureaucracy, congressional committees, and interest groups. These often create strong agendas that are not necessarily in the general public's interest. Citizens United v. FEC. Corporations and unions now unlimited to contribute to issue ads. Munn v. Illinois. 1876, the Supreme Court upheld the Granger laws. The Munn case allowed states to regulate certain businesses within their borders, including railroads, and is commonly regarded as a milestone in the growth of federal government regulation. Clinton v. New York. Banned line item veto from law. Andrew Jackson awarded federal posts to party loyalists, beginning the spoils system. This is known as political patronage. The overall job of the bureaucracy is blank of federal public policies, laws, and regulations. Implementation. The bureaucracy hires individuals with job specialization, aka blank and given policy area. Expertise. A chain of command in which authority follows from the top down is known as having a blank authority structure. Concrete. The blank created the federal civil service. In a civil service system, workers are selected according to merit, not party loyalty. Pendleton Act. The head of the DOJ is the Attorney General. Blank provide a service that could be provided by the private sector. Government corporations. These are created to protect the public by regulating key sectors of the econ. Independent regulatory agencies. NASA, NSF, EPA, and GDSA are all examples of independent executive agencies. SCOTUS can use its power of blank to declare a bureaucratic action as either constitutional or unconstitutional. Judicial review. A large, compliant organization of appointed officials. Bureaucracy. An alliance BTW, an admin agency, SIGs, corporations, and a congressional committee. Iron triangle. The blank is a set of issues and problems that policymakers consider as important. Political agenda. Policy experts, media pundits, congressional staff members, and interest groups who regularly debate an issue. Issue networks. The bureaucracy has blank powers in making specific public policies when Congress passes a general public policy. Authoritative. The bureaucracy has blank in adjudicating violations of federal regulations, rules, or law and issuing fines and prosecuting the wrongdoer. Administrative adjunction, quasi-judicial power. The EOP contains this office which helps POTUS craft his budget. Office of Management and Budget. The blank has the sole power to add or subtract from a cabinet-level department or agency's budget. HOR. Congressional blank over the bureaucracy includes holding hearings, reorganizing a department and setting new guidelines for an agency. Oversight. Cabinet secretaries often develop a strong blank to their departments. Bond relationship. Define vesting clause. Article 2, Section 1, of the Constitution, which states that executive power shall be vested in a President of the United States of America. Requirements to be President. 35 years old, jus soli, citizen for 14 years. Where does the title, President, come from? State constitutions. Weaknesses of Articles of Confederation. No national army, no national currency, no national courts, no national power to tax. How can POTUS most greatly influence the future of the federal government? SCOTUS appointments. What does it mean to receive an ambassador? To recognize another country's existence. Famous example of treaty not getting ratified in Senate. Treaty of Versailles. Famous example of treaty being amended by Senate. Panama Canal Treaty. What are executive agreements similar to? What is their downside? They are similar to treaties, but do not have to be used by future presidents. Example of an increase of presidential power at Congress's expense. Executive agreements. 3 precedents set by George Washington, taking power not inherently given in the Constitution is known as what type of power? Primacy of national government, the cabinet, executive prominence in foreign affairs. These are known as inherent powers. Presidents for 1809 to 1933 are known for Nothing. Seriously, they failed to exercise significant power. This gave Congress large amount of power. Their assertiveness made POTUS look weak. This is the way the framers envisioned the government. When can presidents gain power? During times of crisis. What are Lincoln's questionable acts? Suspends habeas corpus, expands army over congressional limits, initiates war. Congressional approval, stops mail of those suspected of treason. Korematsu vs. U.S. SCOTUS ruled that Japanese internment camps during World War II were okay. They ruled POTUS power does expand during national crisis. How can executive orders be stopped? Judicial review, new presidents removing the last orders. What is the spoiler role? When a third party takes votes away from one party, allowing the opposing party an easy victory. What did FECA create? Hard money limited how much you can spend on your own campaign, started the Federal Election Commission. Buckley v. Valeo stops the ban on how much money a person can put into their own campaign. What specifically was created by the merit system? The civil service exam. Explain the significance of the election of 1800. First time the party changes in the White House created a smooth transition, also highlighted issue of having the VP be the runner-up to POTUS. What is the Iron Triangle an example of? Client politics. What is an example of the Iron Triangle? The connection between the House Armed Services Committee, the Department of Defense, and contractors, such as Boeing and Lockheed Martin. How has federal employment changed since 1950? It hasn't, it has remained constant. How has state and local government employment changed since 1950? What does this show the influence of? It has gone up drastically. This shows an increase in mandates and block grants. What is the role of the vice president? He is usually insignificant in the executive branch, although presidents can delegate power to them. They balance the ticket, both in geographic region and in party ideology. They create a sense of the national government experience, whatever that means. It was on the PowerPoint. Divided government. A government in which one party controls the presidency and a different party controls one or both houses of Congress. Unified government. A government in which one party controls both the presidency and both chambers of Congress. Representative democracy. A system of government that gives citizens the opportunity to vote for representatives who will work on their behalf. Direct democracy. A system of government in which members of the polity meet to discuss all policy decisions and then agree to abide by majority rule. Electoral College. Representatives of each state who cast the final ballots that actually elect a president. Faithless electors. Electors who are appointed by state legislators to vote for the candidate who won that state's vote, but who then choose, for whatever reason, to vote for the other candidate. Cabinet. The formal body of presidential advisors who head the 15 executive departments. Presidents often add others to this body of formal advisors. Executive Office of the President. Executive agencies that report directly to the President and perform staff services for the President. Top positions are filled by presidential nomination with Senate confirmation. Office of Management and Budget. Agency whose major task to help the President coordinate legislative and budgetary proposals from the executive branch. National Security Council. Advises the President on matters of national safety. Council of Economic Advisers. Group in the executive office that is the main sources of information and advice for the presidency on the economy. Independent executive agencies. Federal agencies that are part of the executive branch but outside the structure of cabinet departments. Their heads typically served fixed terms of office and can be removed only for cause. Independent regulatory agencies. Agencies created by Congress that are generally concerned with a specific aspect of the economy. Government corporations. Businesses established by Congress that perform functions that could be provided by private businesses. Presidential honeymoon. When a president first gets elected and is popular among the people and Congress will pass his laws more easily. Pocket veto. one of two ways for a president to disapprove a bill passed by Congress: if the president does not sign the bill within 10 days of receiving it, and Congress has adjourned within that time, the bill does not become law. Line item veto. This allows the president to approve some provisions of a bill and disapprove others, ruled unconstitutional by SCOTUS. Clinton v. New York City case, which ruled that the line item veto was unconstitutional. Executive privilege. A claim by the president that consultations with advisers are confidential and need not be disclosed to the courts of Congress. United States v. Nixon case, which ruled that executive privilege was not unqualified. Clinton v. Jones, a landmark United States Supreme Court case establishing that a sitting president of the United States has no immunity from civil law litigation against him for acts done before taking office and unrelated to the office. Congressional Budget and Impoundment Act. An act designed to reform the budgeting process by making Congress less dependent on the president's budget, established a fixed budget calendar and a budget committee in each house. Impoundment. The refusal of the president to spend money appropriated by Congress, limited in the Budget Reform Act of 1974. War Powers Act. Law which required the president to inform Congress of any commitment of American troops abroad within 48 hours. Trustee approach and delegate model. Role played by elected representatives who listen to constituents' opinions and then use their best judgment to make final decisions. Independent counsel law. A special prosecutor, which could be used by Congress or the Attorney General to investigate individuals holding or formerly holding certain high positions in the federal government and in national presidential election campaign organizations. Lame duck. A politician whose power has been diminished because he or she is about to leave office. Presidential Succession Act of 1947. Lists, in order, those in line to succeed the President: 1. HOR Speaker; 2. President pro tempore of the Senate; 3. Secretaries of State, Treasurer, and Defense, and other cabinet heads in order of the creation of their department. Twelfth Amendment. an attempt to remedy confusion between the selection of presidents and vice presidents that beset the election of 1800, provided for separate elections for each office. • 22nd Amendment, adopted in 1951, prevents a president from serving more than 2 terms or more than 10 years if he came to office via the death or impeachment of his predecessor. • 25th Amendment, adopted in 1967 to establish procedures for filling vacancies in the office of President and Vice President, as well as providing for procedures to deal with the disability of a president. Impeachment, a form of indictment voted by the HOR against the President, VP, and all civil officers of the federal government. Bully pulpit, a president's personality and ability to persuade others, allowing him to gain support of members of Congress, the public, and even foreign leaders. Inherent powers, powers of the president that can be derived or inferred from specific powers in the Constitution. Executive orders, a rule or regulation issued by the president that has the effect of law. All of these must be published in the Federal Register. Executive agreements, formal government agreement entered into by the President that does not require the advice and consent of the U.S. Senate. Approval ratings, a measurement of how popular, or unpopular, a leader or program is among the public. Imperial presidency, term used to describe a president as an emperor who acts without consulting Congress or acts in secrecy to evade or deceive Congress. Recess appointments, presidential appointment made without Senate confirmation during Senate recess. Executive czars can run or organize governmental departments, and may devote their expertise to a single area of work. Patronage, spoils system, bureaucratic appointments made on the basis of political considerations. Pendleton Act, law which began the process of transferring federal jobs from patronage to the merit system. Discretionary authority, the ability of a bureaucracy to choose courses of action and make policies not spelled out in advance bylaws. Competitive service, merit system, the system by which federal civil service jobs are classified into grades of levels, to which Appointments are made on the basis of performance on competitive examinations. Office of Personnel Management. The office in charge of hiring for most agencies of the federal government, using elaborate rules in the process. Civil Service Reform Act of 1978 recognized that many high-level positions in the civil service have important policy-making responsibilities and that the President and his cabinet officers ought to have more flexibility in recruiting, assigning, and paying such people. Hatch Act. Law that prohibits civil servants from active participation in partisan politics. Whistleblower Protection Act created an Office of Special Counsel to investigate complaints from bureaucrats claiming they were punished after reporting to Congress about waste, fraud, or abuse in their agencies. Iron Triangle. The policy-making network composed of a government agency, a congressional committee, and an interest group. Issues Network. Members of interest groups, congressional staffers, university faculty, experts and think tanks, and members of the media who regularly debate government policy on a certain subject. Authorization. Legislation that originates in a legislative committee stating the max amount of money that an agency may spend on a given program. Appropriation. Money formally set aside for a specific use. Red tape. A bureaucratic pathology in which complex rules and procedures must be followed to get things done. Freedom of Information Act. A law giving citizens the right to inspect all government records except those containing military intelligence, or trade secrets or information revealing private personnel actions. National Environmental Policy Act requires agencies taking actions that will have a major impact on the environment to prepare environmental impact statements, which are subject to review by the EPA. Administrative law. The body of law that governs the activities of administrative agencies of government. Congressional oversight. Congressional supervision of the bureaucracy. Legislative veto. Method by which Congress delegates authority to the executive branch while retaining oversight power. Either house of Congress may block a proposed executive action declared unconstitutional. Inns v. Chadha ruled that the legislative veto is unconstitutional. Conflict. A bureaucratic pathology in which some agencies seem to be working at cross purposes to other agencies. Duplication. A bureaucratic pathology in which two or more government agencies seem to be doing the same thing. Imperialism. A bureaucratic pathology in which agencies tend to grow without regard to the benefits their programs confer or the costs they entail. Waste. A bureaucratic pathology in which an agency spends more than is necessary to buy some product or service. Veto message. A statement sent to Congress by the President giving the reasons for vetoing a bill. Veto power. The formal, constitutional authority of the President to reject bills passed by both houses of Congress, thus preventing their becoming law without further congressional action. New Deal. The name given to the program of relief, recovery, reform, begun by President FDR in 1933 to bring the United States out of the Great Depression.